Today, we're going to be ranking some of the best and worst VTuber advice we've ever heard using a tier list that scales from amazing advice you can't ignore all the way to bad advice that can actually hinder your growth and even your mindset. And I won't be doing it alone because today I'll be joined by Zekoz.
Hey yo, my name is Zekoz. I'm a bird VTuber who likes to make videos on VTubing advice and VTuber tech. Thanks for having me, Phlox. Lead the way.
Most tier lists follow a standard S to F ranking system where S is God tier and F is pretty f***ing terrible. But we've adjusted our tier list to have slightly more defined tiers, so it's easier to follow along with our ranking system and take notes for your own use. And sitting at the very bottom of the tier list will be the only advice we came across that is actually just bad.
Yep, and that is, you should call out your lurkers and get them to talk more. Did you know that 99.9% of viewers on Twitch are lurkers? I'm kidding, I pulled that number out of my ass. But the point is, a lot of viewers are lurkers. People have their own reasons for lurking, whether it's for anxiety or work or whatever else. Either way, calling out your lurkers and trying to force them to interact will only do the opposite and scare them away. They make up an important part of your viewership and should be treated with respect. Into the grimy pits of F tier it goes.
The next category is dedicated to advice that isn't necessarily bad, but doesn't really do much for you either, and that's to post at an optimal time. Social media was mostly chronological back in the day, but almost everything is algorithm-based now, so there's not really a need to post at an optimal time anymore. Of course, if your audience has notifications on, that initial boost from whoever is online to see it can help push your content out. So just post during daylight hours and be consistent with it. This advice goes in D tier.
The C tier category consists of optional advice that may not be effective for John VTuber over there, but could just be the thing your channel needs. Regardless, even if it's not always applicable, there's always potential for it to provide some benefit.
First up is having a conventionally attractive VTuber model. No. Just because you're a VTuber does not mean you are free from the shackles of beauty standards. Pretty privilege still exists for us.
And the reality is that you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but there will be people who will absolutely love your design. So you should own it, rather than try to please everyone. It's true that appearances can bring people in, but at the end of the day, it's your quality of content and your personality that truly makes them want to stay. And that's much more valuable than an arbitrary beauty standard. Into C tier it goes.
Next in C tier, have a prepared spiel for when you get raided. Most people choose to greet the raider and their audience, introduce themselves, and talk about the raider's stream. Some streamers and VTubers even go out of their way to set up custom shoutouts and even thank those that raided them in a tweet after the stream is over. But doing all of that is not required. The bare minimum is just to say hello to the raider and thank them for sending their audience your way. Not having a spiel prepared simply won't cause strain for your career. This advice goes in C tier.
The next one for C tier is quite divisive, and it's applying to agencies. Agencies can be a hit or miss for many, especially considering the recent controversies. But the reality is that agencies can actually do a lot of wonders for one's VTubing career, which is why people still apply to them. They're able to provide professional support and funding that, admittedly, is quite hard to come by as an indie, alongside exposure to an already established audience. As a VTuber, you're basically a one-person production team, so if you start feeling overwhelmed, then maybe agencies are something you should consider. That being said, you should be very mindful of applying to one. Take those rose-tinted glasses off, because at the end of the day, agencies are a business and businesses like profits. So make sure you read the contracts carefully and do your research. But if you stay as an indie, know that it's still possible. I mean, just look at 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍, for example, or Girl DM, or Shy Lily, just to name a few. Therefore, this advice belongs in C tier.
Next up in C tier is to treat your content as a business. If you're curious about VTubing because of the tech, potential friendships, creative opportunities, or just the pure fun of it all, you might not have your mind set on monetizing anything. And if that's the case, you can approach your content journey with an incredibly lax mindset. If you want to make reliable money, you can choose to treat your VTubing work as a career or business. Changing your mindset from casual to business can simply mean better content planning and more mindful time management. But it's still possible to make money without a business mindset. It just depends on what you're going for. Not everyone's goal is to be a full-time business, so it's just not great advice across the board. C tier.
And that brings us to our final entry into C tier. You should be playing a character. Some VTubers tend to play as a character. They put on a voice, they talk in a certain way, and even roleplay to the lore they were given. The reason for this is simple: branding. But the funny thing is that the acting eventually fades away, and these VTubers start to look a bit more normal with each passing stream. But despite the change, fans still stick around. Why? It's because people like how entertaining they are, how relatable they are, and how connected they feel when watching them. In a world that's growing more isolated and filled with fake AI slop, people desire connection from something real. If you can offer that, then there's no need to play as a character. That being said, there's no harm in playing as a character if you want to, but never feel obligated to do so. That's the beauty of VTubing. You're free to do whatever you want. With our final entry into C tier complete, we can start working our way into applicable advice that can help you out in some capacity. At the very least, nothing negative will come out from applying these.
Our first advice in B tier is that you need to be networking. Networking is pretty much an unavoidable aspect of working in general, and VTubing is no exception to that. It can only benefit you to connect with other creators and network with business professionals.
Take Phlox and I, for example. I reached out to her on Twitter after watching her videos on YouTube. Considering our style of content, I figured it would be a cool opportunity to collab and make a new like-minded friend. We're both a bit on the socially anxious side, but look, we're here to make this video happen.
You don't need to force yourself to be uncomfortable in social settings to be successful. You can choose to be as social or as antisocial as you want, so this advice goes in B tier.
Next we have following trends. Trend hopping is popular because it's effective. A trend has an established audience, so by trend hopping, you're pulling from a much larger pool of viewers than normal. But while it is a benefit overall, try to follow ones that you actually enjoy and are relevant to your type of content. Otherwise, your quality will drop and you'll bring in the wrong type of audience. My advice is to add in your own unique twist to a trend that you like. If done right, it can do wonders for your growth by opening up your channel to more people. B tier for this one.
Next in B tier, pick only one social media site to start. Learning and studying multiple platforms at once can be a massive undertaking. If you choose to focus on one instead, you'll get familiar with their process, the site's UI, and how the algorithm and your audience behave on that site. And while you can always cross-post your content, it's easy to stretch yourself too thin, especially when starting. So in most cases, picking a main platform to focus on is decent advice. This goes in B tier. Now it's time to move on to our A tier.
Both Phlox and I have considered these solid tips that you should definitely consider and apply if you're looking to grow as a VTuber.
First in A tier, don't focus on your numbers to start. The amount of work you put into your content doesn't always give a return on investment in terms of views. So at first, you should just make what you enjoy. And when you're ready, you can start taking a look at your stats.
Numbers can be helpful for analytics to see if you're going in the right direction. But if you focus on them too much, it can easily consume you and destroy your mental. So don't focus on the outcome, instead prioritize the process and learning environment for as long as you can.
If you don't make any content at all, there won't be stats to look at anyways. So create first, get some practice in, and analyze later. A tier advice.
And speaking of environment, we have our next piece of A tier advice. Your environment matters for VTubing. A cleaner physical environment contributes to a positive mental state, so tidy your desk up. Plus, having a well-lit setup can actually help your model's expressiveness, because better lighting means better tracking clarity. But your physical environment isn't the only thing you should be mindful of, because the one up here matters too. So stop doom scrolling and watch videos with the intent to learn and improve. Better environment, better content, into A tier it goes.
Another A tier advice is to focus on uploading content instead of streaming if you want to grow. We've probably all heard this advice at some point, and I reluctantly have to tell you that it's real. Take it from me, I streamed on and off for short periods of time, and then I stopped streaming altogether to focus on YouTube, and my Twitch exploded. It goes to show that when people like your content, they'll be more inclined to come see you yap when you're live.
Similarly to Phlox, I don't stream much, so the growth of my YouTube channel drove the growth of my Twitch streams. If it wasn't for my consistent uploading of YouTube videos, my Twitch would literally be dead in the water.
It's hard to build an audience from streaming alone, but editing down VODs and clips for content will almost certainly bring in new people. A tier advice for sure.
The last piece of A tier advice before we move on to the coveted S tier category is to start first, polish later. We all have to start somewhere, and the harsh truth is that it'll take a while to reach any kind of real success. I, for example, reached my first 1,000 subs after 2 years of YouTube. Now, you might see that as a bummer, but I argue the opposite. Rapid growth can be a detriment if you're not prepared for it. So use that slow start to figure things out. You're free from expectation, which means you're free for experimentation. You'll develop skills over time as long as you keep at it. No one starts out amazing at anything. In the wise words of Jake the dog,
sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
So embrace the suck. Not like that, you know what I mean. Slow and steady wins the race, but to win the race, you need a starting line first. Solid advice. A tier.
Finally, our last section, the S tier section, which is full of amazing advice you should take to heart. Let's kick it off with our first advice. Start with an inexpensive model. Top of the line VTuber models can cost thousands of dollars. And while those are great, they are a massive expense to veterans and beginners alike. But you don't need to spend that much. You actually don't have to spend anything at all. There are dozens of free starting points, like pick crews or free apps. You can even learn to draw and rig yourself.
If you're getting started with VTubing in the big 2026, then you're in luck, because getting a high quality model has never been more accessible. Back in my day, there was no such thing as customizable live 2D models. These offer a ton of choices to make your model unique to you without breaking the bank. And for my bros out there, try these. If you want to see more, there's a Discord dedicated to listing all of the customizable VTuber models ever.
With all the great low budget and free resources we have now, we highly recommend you start here instead of spending first. S tier advice.
And while you can start cheap, it doesn't mean that you should ignore your branding, which is the next piece of S tier advice. Your branding is key for discoverability and growth. Everyone wants a cool model and a cool design, but just because you're cool doesn't mean you're memorable or even recognizable. And that's the part most people tend to ignore. Branding. To achieve this, consistency is key for everything. And I quite literally mean everything. Your model, your streams, your channel, your color schemes. I sound like I'm rapping, but it's the truth. Now, that being said, here's something crucial that you need to remember. The bigger you are, the harder it'll be to change your brand. So when you're first starting out, use that opportunity to explore and find a solid foundation, because a solid foundation can set you up for an equally solid VTuber career. S tier advice.
Our last S tier advice is that you need to give yourself breaks. Forcing yourself to relax is an absolute must when it comes to VTubing. Every time you work on content, you need to incorporate dedicated breaks, be it splitting up your work over several days or taking 10 or 20-minute breaks while you work. It helps you keep focused and feeling lively throughout the process.
Taking regular breaks also prevents the likelihood of burnout. Once you've hit burnout, it's a downward spiral that is extremely hard to come back from. So prevention is key.
Breaks are a requirement, not a suggestion. And if you don't take it seriously, it can and will catch up to you.
And there we have it. A full list of VTuber advice from the stinky dumps of F tier all the way to the coveted holy grail of S tier. We thought about each of these carefully, but they are of course open to your own personal interpretation as well.
We hope some of these bits of advice can help you out when you start or continue your VTubing journey. So let us know in the comments some of the best and worst advice you've heard as a VTuber yourself.
Thank you again, Phlox, for having me. It was a blast making this with you. Ciao!
Thanks for joining me, Zekoz. And don't forget, guys, we have another video over on Zeko's channel that you should definitely go watch. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!